Depression. Can it get worse? It always does. The weather is destroyed. The world is destroyed. Africa is overwhelmed with AIDS cemeteries, replacing civilization. Antarctica is melting and will drown the world. All animals are getting extinct, all because of man, and we humans are the guilty ones. The mess seems complete and can't get any worse, but it always does. So what the hell can we do about it? Nothing. But make the best of it, in at least trying to survive. The urge of freedom. You cannot stop it, and there is no force of nature in this universe that ever could. This urge of freedom, running wild and out of every prison, constantly escaping all control, to never be fenced in by anyone or any human effort. Man has failed completely in his effort to contain Dame Nature, running wild now, melting down the poles, and threatening to drown all mankind once again, since man has never learned to be more sensible. Already William Blake saw all the madness in environmental ruining and exploitation, but the sanest prophets were the most ignored. You can't pin down the creativity of life, confine her, limit her, or even understand her, but she will escape, surprisingly to baffle even more each human effort to have her contained. Now nature will reclaim the planet ruined by the lunacy of humankind, and the only thing that we can do about it is to bury our dead, make cemeteries, and lament the ruin of our folly. Handel and his widows. He had no family, no obvious sex life, and historians have complained about the absence in his life of scandals. Yet he worked with women all his life, but only prima donnas, divas, stars of self-obsession, and he said that ladies thought of nothing but themselves. And yet he took them on, but not just anyone. He cared for widows, mothers without men, and children without parents, instituting even for their care an orphanage, and even caring for the widow of his teacher, Master Zachow, back in Germany. Widows was his dominant speciality. He felt at ease with them, and they were not pretentious. Their relationships were without obligation tensions, so he was quite happy all his life with working hard as a paragon workaholic bachelor, since music, singing above all, was more than satisfactory, and filling all his life with love of harmony and melody and beauty. Is it possible to be a realist without becoming a cynic? Cynicism is deemed inhuman, and it is, while cynics usually are realists, and usually are quite right, which is abominable, since all cynicism is so disgusting. But there are idealists also, and they are not always unrealistic, and when they stick to realism, they also usually prove right. Here is the incongruity. Idealism is contrary to cynicism, while they both get all their strength from the same realism. The choice is simple. Be a true idealist and realist, base your idealism on realism, and cynicism will not be necessary, but will only prove quite wrong. Impossible hibernation. We tried, and hard indeed, to just forget about it, leave it, let it go to hell, as much as they insisted, all those humbug leaders of deception of politics, Johnson, Nixon, Reagan, Bushes. Try to hibernate, go underground, and hide from the aggressions against all outsidership. The prophets that were right, and dare to speak out, saying, "You are wrong," to all those that were wrong. while they continued bulldozing the world and shut up all investigations of the truth, in murders like of Kennedy and Butto, Politkovskaya and Rainbow Warriors. But we failed. We never could stay underground. We never could keep still. We never could abandon our concern. And so the demonstration revolution just keeps rolling on, futilely but heroically, against the established faked world order that keeps trying to enforce global destruction, while we poor and underground outsiders seem to be the only ones to try to change directions. And a fact is, let it be a cheer, the world direction always changed. Domenico Scarlatti and his princess saved by a castrato. He was so fond of his dear princess, Barbara of Portugal, that he was happy to remain a prisoner of music in her care throughout his long idyllic life. Her treatment of her favourite musician, on the other hand, appears as rather odd. She was so fond of his sonatas, of exquisite musical delicacy, that she would keep them to herself and not allow them to be published. Thus, some 70 were only published in his lifetime, while the rest, 500 more, did not see daylight until long after his death. The first complete collection published 1971. The odd thing is that his best friend, the famous Farinelli, a castrato, driven into exile after Barbara's demise, took with him into Italy the one unique edition of the 555 sonatas, one example in 2 volumes, eventually one ending up in Parma, one in Venice, not united to be published finally by Brahms. But all this bother long after his death, the worries and the problems of his scattered music, all the masses, operas and other compositions being lost, was no concern of poor Domenico, who just was happy in the idylls of his queen to play for her his intimate sonatas and forget about the worthless rest of all the world. Hubris. There is no harm in it if it is only love. Wings were made to fly on, and there are no stronger winds than those of love to take you anywhere, as in the air there are no bounds, no limits to your freedom, and no end to your expansion. Love, however, is the only thing to render hubris positive, the only thing to justify it, and the more for being so unique. A compliment. Is it wrong of me to be intoxicated merely by the sight of your long hair, the length of which so obviously is just a demonstration of your love in constant growth and warmth of colour, and so generously manifested in the open? Once you called me the most sensual of all your lovers, a compliment that made me tremble, since I never knew a woman who had known men better than yourself. I quaked from bottom up, and do so still each time I see you, in the splendour of your heart's magnificence, so evident in glory only in your hair. The rest of your ability, nobility, and character is not so obvious, and will I keep secret, as the chamber of our love reserved for us. The one mistake of Joseph Haydn. It was his marriage, but it was not really his fault. His love was the younger sister, who became a nun, and then the family insisted he should marry the much older sister, who became a hag, with no interest at all in music, and he called her on his journeys, when she could not hear it, the infernal beast. And being Catholics, he never could divorce her, but had to wait until she died to get his freedom, then at 68. But that was his life's one unique mistake, and he was not without his comforts. He cared for Luigia Polzelli and her sons, and one of them might have been his. When he was free at last to marry her, he was too old, while she made him to promise not to marry anyone instead of her, which he of course agreed to in his kindness, while she went back to Italy and married someone else. His best friend was the wife of his employer's doctor, though, Marianne von Gentzinger, which, although no more than a friendship, was his life's most intimate relationship besides the one with Mozart. When they both turned in too early, Marianne and Mozart, he was never happy any more, and turned into a bitter and sarcastic miser. Still, he left a mystery behind, when in his will he died a rich man, left to various ladies various fortunes, like the unknown daughters Dillin and the daughter of Accountant Kandler, a soprano Barbara Pielhofer, and an unknown chambermaid. Who were all these good ladies to receive such fortunes from a humble but most generous musician, who discreetly never told the story how he found much better wives outside his marriage without compromising anyone? Our divorces. We were constantly divorced, not by ourselves, but by our circumstances. You being forced abroad by sudden family upheaval, me reduced to poverty for decades, exiled into underground existence, until you returned, beset by men who I refused to challenge, rather making friends with all of them for your sake, since you loved them. You felt guilty for their sake and thought I must disdain you, while I only was withheld by other problems, poverty, depression, illness, constant worries, and what not, and all but your predicaments. And still, all those divorces, uninvited and involuntary, always brought us back again into each other's arms, and closer every time. So let them just continue. They will always fail completely, as they did from the beginning. Mozart's clever wife. He was hopeless, never could keep anything in order, lost his income on the pools, and always ill since childhood, when his father drove him on too hard. He loved her elder sister, who refused him for his wantonness, and so he married little sister Constance, who would compensate her lack of beauty, which had been her sister's, with considerable skill and sensibility. When Mozart died too young and deep in debt, most of his works were in a mess, unpublished, but she undertook to organize them, married Consul Nissen, moved to Copenhagen, and in good time published all her husband's work in perfect order, making fortunes. Without her, 9/10 of all his works would surely have been lost forever. Sorrows. Can emptiness be filled with anything? It must. A vacuum sucks, and black holes are attractive. But can sorrows that are abstract fill a concrete emptiness? Let's stick to philosophic symbolism, which only can make all things possible. Indeed, can sorrows be so great so as to fill a universal emptiness, since there are no greater human feelings than the sentiments of grief and sorrow? So, indeed, can sorrow fill up anything, and even the most universal emptiness, which maybe only sorrows can fill up. Our reward. when we intermingle in each other's arms, escaping cruel persecution and invalidation of the ignorance of narrow minds, and wallow in our misery of poverty and outcast loneliness, our comfort is our joy and happiness of the illumination that we share together, totally transcending all the bustle of the mob, reducing history to but a shred of junk lost in the desert, while we keep our universal paradise for ourselves, of everlasting truth and sense and beauty, safeguarding the legacy of our patient work. The world cares not for us, so let's ignore it, and if they are curious about our love, let them work hard and suffer by themselves to reach it, as we did ourselves. Beethoven's Immortally Beloved. The problem is we don't know who she was. We only know that she was his immortally beloved, and it couldn't have been anyone. He had a number of admiring ladies, pupils, countesses and princesses, but his idea of sex was somewhat paradoxical. With women, their body has no soul and their soul has no body. So how could he reach them? By his music only, as with Leonora in his only opera, one of the most intriguing, sympathetic, charming ladies in all literature of opera and music. And there are authentic testimonies that he always was in love. So we will have to just resign. The name of his immortally beloved will discreetly be unknown forever, while the only certain thing is that he loved the more. The hippie trail, tracing the past forever. When the hippies started moving in the 60s, revolutionizing all the world with love and beauty, music and perception, it was thought to be all new, but it was only a renewal. The idea is easily traced back, and first among the hippies is considered the Norwegian Heyerdahl, who later crossed all seas on rafts to prove how ancient civilizations linked together. He wrote Fatuhiva, the true story of his hippie life, together with his wife in the South Seas, in radical refutal of all civilization, living actually like Robinson Crusoe. That was back in the 30s, but still he was not the first one. Early in the century there was a hippie colony at Monte Verita in Switzerland, close to Ascona, where brave pioneers tried out a different lifestyle, cultivating their own food and vegetables, living primitively outside civilization. One of them was the pacifist writer Erich Maria Remarque. Before that, you had the Tolstoyans in old Russia, striving for a similar free life of purity under the sun, led and inspired by the writings of Leo Tolstoy, who left his property himself in preference of poverty, but there were many similar communities long before that. They actually were always there throughout all history. Also the Freemasons started as an underground community, detached as an alternative to mundane transient disorder. The monastery movement of the Middle Ages rose from such traditions, like the sect of the Essenes, who brought forth Jesus, but Hezekiel the prophet, and in Hellas the Pythagoreans were already of that kind. And before that you had the Asian monastery movement of the Buddhists, which continues still today, and long before that, and after that, or even through the hippies, started Greenpeace, with a number of environmental organizations setting off green revolutions and the Rainbow Movement, among others, who with global threat to our environment now see it as their task to take responsibility, to spite authority, bureaucracy and madness of politics, to save at least what can be saved of our so politically violated planet. Hippiespåret. När hippisarna rörde på sig under 60-talet och gav upphov till en ny revolution av kärlek, skönhet, fred, musik och perception, så trodde alla det var något nytt, men det var bara en förnyelse. Idén är lätt att spåra bakåt, och den första konsekvente hippin anses norrmannen Thor Heyerdahl ha varit. Senare berömd för sina resor över oceanerna med flottar för att visa hur antika civilisationer var förbundna med varandra. Han skrev Fatuhiva, boken om ett riktigt hippieliv, helt i naturen på en ö i Söderhavet, i fullständigt avståndstagande från all modernitet, i konsekvent livsföring som en Robinson med fru. Det var på 30-talet, men han var ej först. I seklets början fanns en hippiekoloni vid Monte Verita, vid schweiziska Ascona, där det deltog amanuenser ifrån hela Europa. En av dem var pacifisten Erich Maria Remarque, och även det var konsekventa i allt avståndstagande från alla den moderna civilisationens avigsidor. Före dem så hade vi gamla Ryssland, tolstojanerna, som likaledes strävade mot sundhet i naturen, inspirerade av Leo Tolstoj och hans pacifism och vegetarianism. Han övergav själv all sin egendom för fattigdom, men det fanns många liknande kommuner, kollektiv och hippiekolonier före det. Det fanns i själva verket alltid i historien. Även frimurarna började som avståndstagande och underjordisk rörelse som alternativ till världens etablerade och ständigt övergående oordning. Medeltidens klosterrörelser var samma fenomen, liksom esséerna i Palestina, som ju Jesus kom från, medan klosterrörelsen i själva verket har stiftats av Hesekiel. Före honom hade vi pythagoreerna i Grekland, medan före dem vi redan hade den buddhistiska filosofin med dess universella klosterregel, som gav hela Asien dess civilisation, en rörelse som pågår oförändrad än idag. Och före dem och efter hippisarna, eller genom dem, kom Greenpeace och miljöskyddsaktivisterna med regnbågsrörelsen och andra frihetsaktivister som med det globala hotet mot miljön nu ser det som sin uppgift och sitt ansvar att i trots mot politikens vanvett och byråkrati åtminstone försöka rädda vad som räddas kan av vår politiskt så missbrukade planet. In the light of our love, I always saw you in a light of lasting quality and durability, of an idealism that would not fade, and it is shining still. You never lost the beauty of your brave ideals, and thus you went through all the hells of life, unharmed, untarnished, and untouched. We are like children still, like as we were originally, when my love first touched you in the blend of our naivety of immaturity, to never leave you outside any more the heart of our common secret. Our ideal continues, leading us, uniting us, and finding us together in the destiny that ever brought us nigher to the essence of our mystery. On the safe side of midnight, the storm is over and the crisis past. It was a hell to go through, but well worth it, only since we reached the other side of love, where we are safe to go on with our journey towards growing light, development of the enlightenment and everlasting future glories. All we have to do is simply to continue, never giving up, our quest for getting better, and achieving the impossible at last, to get in touch, to never separate again.